This is where my parents live, Mark declared suddenly upon his visit. Behind him, his in-laws nodded happily. I found myself in the middle of an online meeting and quickly apologized to the other party before ending the call. Irritated, I turned my gaze towards the door. "Why did you come all of a sudden?" I asked them, maintaining my composure. My father-in-law proudly replied, "We'll pay off the mortgage, so please leave." It was hard to suppress a laugh at his statement. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law was just staying at home without any employment. Yet Mark was completely in favor of his parents' opinion. Disappointed by his stance, I considered divorce. "I leave," I quickly replied, to the surprise of all three of them. "The mortgage of the house is $5,000 per month." With an inward smile, I began to pack seriously. Luckily, I had a business trip scheduled for a week starting for the next day. With my suitcase and bank book ready, I headed to the entrance. "Goodbye," I said as I left the house. First, I'd start by transferring the house's title to Mark. I felt excited thinking about my future plans. My name is Shyle Owen. I am 47 years old and work as a web designer. I went independent 5 years ago and have been fortunate enough to receive many project checks. As a result, I've earned more than 5 times my previous salary and now live on the top floor of a high-rise condo. I met Mark, my husband, 3 years ago through Ashley, my former boss, and his cousin. He's kind and honest, but had trouble maintaining relationships, so he had been single for a long time. Around that time, my business was doing well, and I bought the top floor of a high-rise condo, doubling as an office. I wasn't planning on marrying, but Ashley strongly suggested I meet Mark. When I met him, he was very gentle and attractive, looking much younger than his actual age. We started dating and got engaged within 6 months. My parents had already passed away, and my only relative was my brother. So my brother and his wife also attended the family meeting. From Mark's side, his parents and cousin Ashley came. The meeting went smoothly overall. However, my sister-in-law's comment, "This seems stiff," left me puzzled. I never imagined her words would become a reality. After marrying, Mark moved into my house, and we started our life together. His workplace was harsh, requiring him to leave early in the morning and return home past midnight. Despite this, his salary was only a quarter of mine. I suggested to Mark, who was exhausted and went to sleep immediately every day, "It's bad for your health. Why don't you look for another job?" However, he reprimanded me with a face full of anger. "Are you saying I should quit my job? Are you looking down on me because I earn less?" I was surprised by Mark's strong reaction, as we had never argued before. Feeling uncomfortable about unintentionally disrespecting his job, I decided to apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about your health." Mark quickly calmed down and apologized. Our first argument ended swiftly. However, it became difficult to suggest a job change afterward. Mark's return time got even later, and he eventually spent half the week at the office. While I was concerned about his health, he seemed to enjoy his job. So I decided to support him as much as I could, creating a relaxing environment whenever he returned home. "Hey, about my dad's medical expenses, could we increase the remittance a bit?" Mark suggested this when his father was in the hospital with back pain. Sighing inwardly at his request in his father's hospital room, I didn't hesitate to help my in-laws, as I had no parents of my own. Our household depended on my income, with Mark contributing a part of his salary to his parents. His salary wasn't low for a man in his 40s, but the exact amount he kept for himself was unclear. However, it was evident he was providing enough for his parents not to struggle. I couldn't agree when he insisted on increasing the remittance because it was possible only due to my income. Yet it was hard to refuse in front of his parents. "Mark, you're really kind. Thank you so much. It's a big help," they said, looking at me and Mark under their pressure. I reluctantly agreed to increase the remittance. Afterward, my in-laws started demanding money for various reasons, not just the remittance. I wanted to refuse, but they knew I would say no. So they approached Mark instead. Especially weak to his mother's requests, Mark often decided to increase the remittance whenever she asked. On the day his father returned from the hospital, after sending my in-laws off in a taxi, Mark and I returned home, only to find surprisingly that his parents, who were supposed to have gone home, were waiting outside our house. It's tough for Dad to climb our stairs, so I thought we'd take care of him here until his back is fully healed. What? You can't just spring that on me. My surprised reaction made my mother-in-law frown. My father-in-law stood in front of the door as if to say, "Let us in quickly, Mark." "That's okay, right?" Mark replied, and I stared at him in shock. He avoided my gaze from his reaction. As I observed the situation, it became apparent that Mark and his parents had likely already discussed their plans. "Fine, you can stay here until you're fully recovered." I reluctantly relented, ushering my in-laws inside. They surveyed the house and settled onto the living room sofa. "Look at this place, so nice." "Our house is 50 years old and falling apart," remarked my father-in-law. "Yeah, it's really showing its age," agreed my mother-in-law. Mark nodded along, indicating their intention to stay for an extended period. Admittedly, since I had been providing them with financial support, having them here might ease the burden. However, financial considerations aside, it didn't mean I welcomed the idea of cohabiting. Renovating old houses is trendy these days. "How about considering that, Mark?" I suggested. "Yeah, maybe," Mark replied vaguely. 2 years into our marriage, despite being in the supposed honeymoon phase, Mark and I hardly spent time together. We hadn't even gone on a honeymoon. This place served as both my home and office. It was manageable when Mark was out for work, but with my in-laws around all day, it complicated things. If we were to live together, I'd rather move into their house and reserve this place solely as an office. Thanks to my initial resistance, the topic of cohabitation wasn't brought up again by my in-laws. However, even months after my father-in-law's discharge from the hospital, my mother-in-law showed no sign of taking him back. Their belongings started to overflow from the guest room into the living room. "Mark, your dad seems perfectly healthy now. He even went bowling today. Maybe it's time for them to go home," I suggested. "What are you saying? Sending my dad back with his bad back is cruel. What if it gets worse?" Mark raised his voice, leaving me silent. It seemed that Mark believed raising his voice would compel compliance. He frequently asserted his opinions loudly, and opposing him often resulted in my mother-in-law siding with him, putting me at a disadvantage. This dynamic persisted for 2 years. During this time, I took care of all the housework while my in-laws frequently went out to enjoy themselves. Despite my father-in-law's back being fully healed, there were no signs of them returning home. "Sorry, I have a meeting at 1 p.m. today, so I'll eat lunch in my room, okay?" I informed them as I placed lunch on the table. "Understood, but leave the dishes for later," my mother-in-law replied without looking up. As the clock struck 1 p.m., my online meeting commenced. However, about 10 minutes in, the door burst open, and Mark declared, "This is where me and my parents live." My in-laws nodded behind him. I swiftly apologized to the meeting participants and ended the call, inwardly frustrated. "I told you I had a meeting at 1 p.m., I grumbled as I headed towards the door. "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" I asked calmly, only to be met with my father-in-law's smug reply, "We'll pay the mortgage so you can leave." Suppressing a laugh at his audacity, I simply replied, "All right, I'll leave," surprising all 3 of them. With the mortgage at $5,000 per month, I couldn't help but smile inwardly at the prospect of moving forward with my plans. I approached the task with a solemn expression, aware of the serious decision I was making. Fortunately, a week-long business trip awaited me starting the next day. Armed with a meticulously packed suitcase and my bank book, I headed for the exit. "Goodbye," I uttered, bidding farewell to the home that had become a source of contention. The first order of business was transferring the house title to Mark. Brimming with excitement about the impending changes, I checked into a hotel and promptly contacted a real estate agent to initiate the house transfer encompassing the mortgage. The success of the transfer rested on Mark's ability to handle the mortgage. If he couldn't manage it, the options were a lump sum payment or selling the house. Accepting this reality, I directed the agent to find me a new home and office. My work could be conducted remotely, but a dedicated office space was crucial for calm client discussions. The agent identified a suitable location approximately 40 minutes from my previous residence, complete with top-notch security. After a visit and quick decision, I bought the luxurious apartment, considering it a well-deserved reward for my efforts. In the interim period before the move, I stayed in temporary accommodation. Once all the necessary documents were prepared, I delegated the packing and moving process to a professional moving company. During the move, my in-laws and Mark assisted while exchanging unpleasant remarks about me. One of the movers even commented, "You have a difficult family," causing a flush of embarrassment. A week after settling into my new abode, I received a call from Mark. His anxious inquiry about changing the mortgage indicated he was just grasping the situation. His father's shouts in the background urged me to return quickly. Despite the divorce being the plan, Mark seemed taken aback. "But we're getting a divorce, right? It's unfair for me to pay the mortgage if you're the ones living there," he protested. However, I couldn't accept his denial after they had explicitly told me to leave the house. I played back our conversation from that day, caught on tape during a web meeting. Mark was startled by my explanation, having forgotten about my practice of recording meetings for documentation purposes. Undeterred, I informed him about the impending mortgage repayments, subject to a credit check. Mark, seemingly unaware of the details, asked about the monthly amount, leading to my laughter. Despite my prior disclosures and document presentations, Mark seemed oblivious to the $5,000 monthly mortgage. Stunned, he remained speechless, prompting his mother to intervene. She questioned the amount and proceeded to assert that Mark's salary could handle it. Unbeknownst to his parents, Mark hadn't disclosed his actual salary, allowing his mother to confidently declare that they wouldn't assist me any longer. In response, I burst into laughter, provoking her anger. Undeterred, I revealed the actual mortgage amount, $4,000. "What? The mortgage is Mark's monthly salary. That's absurd." My words left her shocked and frozen for a moment, but then she burst into laughter. "That's impossible. Mark has been sending us $4,000 every month. If his salary is really $4,000, he would have been sending us all of it. Stop lying," she exclaimed, refusing to believe me. Remaining calm, I pointed her towards the evidence. "Look at the shelf right by the entrance of the living room. You'll find Mark's salary slips there. If you doubt it, check for yourself." She dismissed my explanation, accusing me of lying, and headed to the indicated shelf. In the background, I could hear Mark trying to stop her. Soon, her voice of surprise came through the phone. "What? There's not even $4,000 here, Mark. What's the meaning of this?" Mark's actual salary turned out to be even lower than I knew, and I could hear his in-laws questioning him in the background. "You might not hear me, but just so you know, the house mortgage is $5,000 a month. Take care," I declared as loudly as possible. Whether they heard me or not, I ended the call. Mark called again several times later, but I ignored them all. "Let's discuss this through a lawyer from now on," I texted him, and then ignored any further communication. The lawyer I hired dealt with frequent contacts in the following days, which soon quieted down. I promptly filed for compensation through my lawyer. After a while, a response came through my lawyer, and I couldn't help but laugh at its contents. It seemed to be co-authored by a team of liars from Mark's side. Their claims were laughable. "The allegations by Shelley are false, and the real victim is our client. We demand compensation for emotional distress," it read. All I could say to my lawyer was, "I'm sorry." The divorce was nearing, but our relationship as a couple was still ongoing. I wanted to get away from a husband who could make such demands. My client wants to meet and discuss in person. It seems Mark doesn't know about this, my lawyer said, handing me a letter. The letter briefly requested to verify the truth behind Mark's claims. I agreed through my lawyer and chose a location far from my current residence for precaution. At the scheduled meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark didn't show up. The lawyer was young and polite, greeting me properly upon arrival. He revealed that his client was actually Mark's mother. According to him, Mark remained silent during their discussions, keeping his head down. His parents kept accusing me, claiming I fabricated fault to demand compensation. As I listened, the lawyer handed me a document detailing the alleged malicious actions. However, my lawyer and I noticed that the document was intentionally crafted to demean me. I explained each point in detail, and the opposing lawyer nodded earnestly, showing understanding. My lawyer presented evidence in line with my explanations. I see the content of your statements is completely different, Jelly. You have solid evidence and a strong case, he commented. Oh, this part is reversed. I pointed out and corrected a mistake. The opposing lawyer was visibly shocked. Once the explanation concluded, he left the room with the same politeness as when he arrived. My lawyer and I strategized to expose Mark and his parents' falsehoods, reaching out to other relevant parties to set up a meeting to discuss compensation. About a month after the meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark and his parents arrived looking haggard. His mother glared at me as if seeing an enemy. You seem to be enjoying all this trouble. Who do you think is responsible for this situation? She asked, dissatisfied with the private dining room I had chosen. It was unfortunate that she didn't like the upscale restaurant she used to favor. However, her irritation might also be influenced by the fact that the opposing lawyer, having learned the truth, dropped their defense. Mother, you used to like this place, right? I anticipated her delight, but she met my words with a somber expression. We entered the restaurant, greeted by staff, briefed on our situation, and escorted to a private room. Mark remained silent until we were seated, then suddenly grew emotional. Shelley, I was wrong. Please help me. I can't go on like this. I'll do anything you say. Please come back, Mark pleaded, stunning his parents. I offered a kind smile, momentarily easing Mark's distress. However, I signaled my lawyer, who handed Mark a document. As Mark paled, I urged him to read it. His mother snatched it, glaring furiously. The document meticulously refuted each of Mark's claims in stark red ink. Enraged, she splashed water on my face, berating me for my arrogance. To everyone's surprise, I burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. My laughter caught them off guard, including my lawyer. Yes, it seems I wasn't the perfect wife, I quipped. I shared the burden of household chores, endured criticism for my infertility, and even had my earnings taken. As Mark's parents continued to rail against me, I signaled my lawyer, who produced a photograph. It depicted Mark entering a hotel with a young woman, my former boss and Mark's cousin, Ashley. Shocked into silence, Mark couldn't deny the evidence. Ashley explained the situation, revealing Mark's infidelity. In the face of his guilt, I submitted the divorce papers and compensation documents. Mark, overwhelmed, began to cry. His parents, equally shocked, faced the reality of their son's actions. Within a month, Ashley informed me that Mark and his parents had moved due to financial strain. Mark's salary couldn't sustain their spending habits, and they sought rent assistance. The compensation for the deceived woman and myself was covered by Ashley's parents. Surprisingly, Ashley found love with Mark's former lawyer, drawn to his decisiveness. Embracing the unexpected turn of events, I started blogging about my experiences, leading to new writing opportunities. Since the divorce, I've been pursued by a corporate executive I met through business. Our relationship turned romantic, and he's proposed we live together. While I contemplate my answer, I'm certain of my decision. As I prepare for our date tomorrow, I reflect on the journey that brought me here, seated in front of my computer once again.